Hello, we're back taking the first small steps towards the GT6 Mk2 restoration. Popped over to the car a couple of weeks back and picked up a box of engine ancillaries. So I've got carbs and distributor and a couple of other things. So last time we put together a distributor test stand, and that's because the first thing we're going to look at is the distributor itself. Now I figure the first thing to do before tearing it apart is to actually put it on the stand and see what the advance curve looks like. Because if it's completely wildly out, it might be time to just buy a whole new assembly of the spindle and the bob weights and so on. But with this bit of kit we can find that out. And I didn't do this initially because I thought that you can feel quite a lot of wear in this distributor, so I thought it would be inaccurate, or I thought it wouldn't tell me anything. However, testing this machine with an old, much more worn Spitfire distributor has shown that actually it's probably going to tell us something useful, because if the advance curve for this one that's on the stand at the moment was about in the right place. So before stripping the GT6 one down, I'm going to give it a test, and then we'll start taking stuff apart. Okay, so we've got the distributor measured. The advance curve is looking below spec. I'll put it up on the screen when I get to that point. Which I was thinking is a bit odd, because you would expect it to go below the minimum rate of advance if it had stronger springs. If the strings are going to wear, they're going to become weaker, they're going to stretch. What I think it must be is it's just full of muck. I guess that's slowing the movement of the weights. Anyway, we've got a data point to see what it's like now, and once we're at the point of being able to test after the wear has been dealt with, that'll be just interesting to see how it's changed. So now I'm going to get that 6-cylinder one stripped down. I'm going to get some 4-cylinder one stripped down to be able to scrounge some parts, and then we'll see what we've got. Right, so I see how much I've destroyed this. Got to have a proper look. This is one of the old Spitfire distributors. I may not have completely killed this shaft. I don't know. Anyway, what I found out is the dog on the end. This shaft does stick through it, so I was able to use a puller in the end. So I figured that out. The hole was actually relatively large, and I couldn't see it around the rivet. The one on the GT6 distributor is actually a roll pin, which is more visible, more sensible, hopefully. Anyway, I drilled through, made a mess, eventually pulled it off, but we can look at what's inside now. Progress. Right, so I've got one of the spare distributors in pieces, and what I've found is that most everything seems pretty okay, actually. Aside from I've caused some damage to this drive dog, which is annoying, but because the rest of it looks usable. Anyway, the problem with this one, and the problem with the GT6 one, is that there's far too much up and down movement of the shaft when it's fitted and assembled. And there should be, when everything's put together, this goes on here, that goes on there, that gap there should be in the region of, is something like 5 thou. And the thing that's controlling that end float is this washer, which hopefully you can see there, that's very worn. And that actually rides against this surface here, which is also worn. Not so much though. And it's quite difficult to determine, I don't know. This is sort of a chamfered edge here, but it looks more like that's eaten into the washer, versus the washer having been seated against that in the first place. But I don't know. So, I think I'm going to have to make something to go there. And what I'm going to do now is, I've got a less worn spare distributor that has a better end float. I don't think it's going to be good enough to just swap out that washer, but it might give me a better idea of what less, if I can see what less wear looks like, I'm going to have an idea of what the replacement part should really look like and what I need to tidy up on these parts. I can see why this would have worn, because it's really not going to get any, well, from as far as I can see, there's really not very much way it's going to get lubrication. So it would potentially through there, if you oil, you put plenty of oil in here, but otherwise that's just going to have been running dry. So I'm thinking the replacement's going to be something a bit more tolerant to that, probably bronze or phosphor bronze, something like that. Anyway, I'm going to do a bit more stripping down of distributors. I nipped out at lunchtime and got the rivet out of the second Spitfire distributor with some slightly dubious use of the press, and then yanked it out in a vise. It is steel, but it's very, very soft, which makes sense with it being a rivet. Obviously it was put in and the end had to be formed. And I'm wondering if that's why I was struggling so much trying to drive it out, because was I just expanding it into the bore? Anyway, the GT6 one has got a roll pin, so that should be a bit easier to deal with. And I got this one apart with less damage. So I'm going to use a puller to get this top, to get the drive dog off, and then we can have a look at what the state of the thrust washer in here is, and that'll kind of give an idea of what it might need to look like, or a replacement might need to look like. So this is the main distributor drive shaft, and this is the bob weights assembly upside down. You can see here we've got our fairly thick sort of collar, or whatever it is, and that's where the thrust washer that I've been talking about goes against. And you can see on this one there's wear to the inner edge, where the thrust washer has started to, or wear to both faces I think, because it's difficult to tell. That feels like it's starting to slope down. On the much more one, well, I'm not sure it's going to come across on the camera, but to me, it's visually, it looks like a slope. So it's clearly, we don't have a flat surface there anymore for a bearing to ride against. You can see the equivalent, or the matching thrust washer is completely destroyed. And it's worn in both. It's actually, maybe not. Yeah, I know it is. I should maybe measure them rather than try to eyeball the thicknesses, but they look quite similar actually. Anyway, okay, so that gives me a better idea of what's supposed to be there. And so, given none of these have got sort of lateral shaft play, I think they're probably all savable. So I might need to get the shaft on the lathe and dress up this edge here so it's a more acceptable bearing surface. But with the replacement thrust washer, I think we'll probably be okay. It seems like I'm going to end up building up some extra distributors. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to get all this lot cleaned up and then take apart the 6-cylinder one. Right, so that's the 6-cylinder one, part 2. Interestingly, this plug for the distributor drive gear it looks like plastic, and the other one I've taken out is metal. But also, the pinions are a little different. So the one with the metal plug had a spike on the end of that drive, and that's got a little button that wouldn't be touching the cap. Similar to the Spitfire ones, this is the problem. This thrust washer is worn through, but there's no play in the shaft, absolutely none. So I think washer and reassemble, possibly play with the springs, and we should be good to go here. The vacuum unit I don't like, because this is wobbling about all over the place. So I'm going to have to think about what to do with that. I'm not sure you can get them anymore. Obviously I've got a couple of Spitfire spec ones kicking around, but they are different How significantly different, I don't know. I'll have to go and look up. And obviously we can test, once I've got vacuum pump, we can test on the actual distributor machine. But anyway, more cleaning up to do, and I'm going to have to order some material with which to make myself some placements for these thrust washers. Or I just buy something. I have to have a proper assessment of how worn the backs of the shafts are, because we can imagine this thrust washer being some sort of standard imperial thickness, in which case it's easier just to, well, to really see if I can buy that. If the backs of these shafts are really worn and need some sort of machining to, you know, give a flat surface for the bearing to run against, then it might, you know, how big is the wear? It might end up as being, you know, not a nice easy number. So getting the right thickness might require machining. So I'm going to have a look at that first. I might not be winning Machinist of the Year, but I've had this on the lathe and I've managed to true up that, well, we'll call it a bearing face in here. And I've ordered some oilite thrust washers, because I think the problem here is lack of lubrication. One of the problems here. And those are designed to be able to cope with low lubrication situations, because they've got oil impregnated into them. So I'm going to do the same thing, or once I've finished cleaning up everything, I'm going to try and do the same thing on the GT6 shaft, and then when the bits turn up, I can try putting everything back together again. So I got my collection of cleaned up parts and distributor bodies, and I've just given the bodies a bit of a sandblast. And so now I should be able to get some paint on. So I bought some bits to have a bit of an experiment. So these are some brass 1 1/4, I think it's 1 1/4 inch core plugs. My plan is to see if they'll fit. Obviously it's sticking out, and it is a little loose. I've got enough bits that I can put 2 distributors together, possibly 3. But the plug for that, for the tacho drive, is another thing that's just listed as NLA. So I thought it's worth having an experiment and seeing what I can do with something you can buy relatively easily. Now, what I thought, with these being brass, slightly softer, I might be able to expand them just a little bit, because we only need a tiny extra for that to be snug. And this is supposed to be fixed by staking, so it bashing little indents in the edge of the soft casting to hold it in place. So I'm going to see what I can do with these. Okay, this seems to be working. Just taking the socket and I'm going around the edge. And that's expanding that just enough. I only needed a tiny bit, so that's now quite a snug fit in the body, and I think I should be able to make it stay. So next will be to cut it down. I can't actually try putting it fully together yet, because the shaft needs to go in first. But I'll see if I can cut the edge off neatly. So I remembered I've got a lathe. I was just able to part off the excess, and that fits in quite nicely. So I'll probably put a bit of sealant around the edge and then stake it as they were originally. I'm only doing one for now, because I still do have a reusable original once I've flattened that dent out. And I still don't know how many. I've got some thrust washers in order, so I don't know how many of my shafts are really going to be usable. But what I will do now is put some paint on these cases, even though I still don't know if I'm going to be able to use all of them. But they're blasted, let's paint them. I think the case is alright. Just the shafts savable, all of them. Don't know. Anyway, I'll stop talking, get on with something. So there we are, and a bit of primer. Can you guess which one the coin is under? Bit of black. So I've got my 3 nicely painted and now dried distributor bodies. They've sat for a couple of days now. Got my order of bits, simply bearings, some roll pins and some oilite thrust washers. So I can go ahead and assemble the first one. Now, why am I doing 3? Well, I have the spare bodies and they are not in, and everything is, I think, is in savable condition, which is great. So while I'm building some, I'm going to build some. That's going to leave me with a spare if I ever need it for my Spitfire, and the other one is going to get sold to cover some of the costs from the bits for building them. So let's see what we can do with getting the end float right on the actual shaft. Okay, so we've got our shaft, body, fibre thrust washer and drive dog. Okay, so I've got my new thrust washers. I think these are 1/16 of an inch. The body and the shaft, and I'm just going to pop everything together and see how we're looking as a starting point. So we're looking for 2 to 5 thou end play. I know this is only rough for the moment, but I want to see if we're in the ballpark and if it's worth trying to secure this better so we can check, or if I'm going to have to go for a different, more packing, more thrust washers, or thicker. So that's 5. Actually, that's pretty close. So the drive dog was 180 out, I think, so just giving it wiggle round. Got that in to hold it. It's in the right place now. I think I can be pretty happy with this. I mean, more like 6 thou. But given my other option here is to take a double thickness thrust washer and take almost half of it off, I think 6 thou, I can be happy with that. So actually, what I've done, I've got some 5mm roll pins to fix this in place, and I've just given that a little tap up, because as I'm going to drill a new hole, I can do that. So this is a slightly larger pin than was there, so I can actually close up that clearance this end a little bit too. So let's get that drilled and fix stuff in place. I've changed my mind slightly. What I'm going to do is get everything assembled, oiled, set the end float as I like it, drill the new hole, put it all together. Otherwise I'll be taking stuff off and putting stuff back on when I don't really need to. I start off with a felt that's going to go in there. It must be soaked in oil. Engine oil. Well, I'm going to use engine oil. There's actually two little indents inside the edges of this that felt locates in. Retainer clip. Plenty of oil on that surface. On that shaft. That's together. Got my infloat where I want it, so I'm going to get the hole drilled, get it pinned together, or the hole re-drilled, and then get it pinned together. Just to double check, there's my rotor arm direction, and I should be expecting the narrower side of the drive dog to be towards the engine. This is or towards this side. So that is what I've got. Let's double check with the intact distributor. Same, pointing this direction. Narrower side of the drive dog is that side. Okay, so there's that one back together. Next job is to get this in. Okay, so there's a tiny little thrust washer that goes there. Put a bit of oil on this. But the manual says to fill this with petroleum jelly, so I'm sure there's probably a more modern equivalent available, but slightly worried this might make the distributor quite stiff. But, got a new plug. I'm going to put a tiny little bit of sealant around and then stake it in. Okay, so you'll see I had to change tack slightly there. This is a slightly earlier, well, slightly different, I assume earlier model, and the plug there was dished slightly. So I wasn't able to use my homemade one. On the other two, they have different style. Let's check. Yeah, the other two have a slightly different style of drive here, so a flush one is okay. Well, that's spinning nicely. So I need to wait till I've got a vacuum unit sorted, cleaned up and finished, and I need to find a little bit of felt to go in here to be the oil wick. Now this is my original GT6 vacuum advance unit. I've got a couple of Spitfire ones as well, and they are different, but it's quite difficult to tell from the spec quite how different, and it looks like they might do if I needed to, if this one isn't savable. So what I want to do first, I've got a little vac pump now, and just test that it's going to vacuum, it's going to move. But there's two other things. There's a lot of play there, and this is translating to, if this is on the distributor, I can see that move the contact plate, which would not really great. And also, this is supposed to be one of the adjustable ones, but the way that's supposed to work is it screws, I think, it screws into this plate here, which is attached to the actual vacuum unit. But it looks like this thread is stripped, because this, I can shove it through. It's not holding, so I want to have a look and see if I can fix that as well. So I'll get the vacuum pump out and see if I can contrive something to fix on here. And then this has got a tiny little split pin in, I think. It's very difficult to see. I'll see if I can get that out and get the lever assembly, or the adjuster assembly out. That's promising, that seems to hold. And move. Good. Okay, actually it's a C-clip, or circlip of some sort. Yeah. Okay, washer on that side of the spring was that way up. So it looks like the threads about here are damaged. Or, well, it's weird actually, because by eye it almost looks tapered. Anyway, I'm going to see if I can figure out what sort of thread this is and what I might be able to do about fixing this problem. Okay, I've gone for this slightly cheaty solution, and this is one out of one of the Spitfire units I got. And that holds nicely. So now it's this wobble, and I'm thinking what I might do is solder a thin bit of brass inside here, and then I'll be able to work that out carefully till I've got a nice fit for this piece. I'm going to get some of these pieces cleaned up a bit first though. I've just been waiting for a day where I can happily evict both the cars for a while and not have them get completely soaked, so I could get this little reinforcement repair welded in, and it has gone. It's gone alright. I think I've not got much heat in this end, which is what I wanted. I've not blown through the very thin metal of the vacuum unit, so and I think if I get this nicely ground, I'm going to drill through the middle, obviously, to have the adjuster thing in there, and hopefully that should work. That was the bin lorry showing up halfway through me drilling a hole, and I had to rush and move the cars. It's Good Friday today, and I wasn't actually expecting they would turn up. Anyway, got the hole drilled. Adjuster fits. There's about as much play as there is in the undamaged one I've still got. So maybe I should have gone with a 9mm drill bit rather than 9.5, because this is nominal. This was 3/8 in. So 3/8. Yeah, it was the same diameter, nominally the same diameter as this. I think this is gonna work. Was it worth doing all that? Probably not. Anyway, I'm gonna get this cleaned up and put a bit of paint on it. So I decided it was going to be extremely hard to get a wire wheel into all the crevices on these vac units, and I've already tried to use power tools. The drill on this one, I already did nearly destroy it. So I've masked them up very thoroughly, and I'm going to give them a bit of a blast. I think I should be fine here, because my masking does seem to work with my cabinet. Obviously it's quite low pressure, relatively speaking. Anyway, see how it goes. So I got those bits in primer, found the GT6's heater valve bracket in the blast cabinet as well, so got that blasted and painted. So I got a painted vacuum unit, a little bit blingy, I know, but I would have liked to have plated them, but I couldn't really have done it with the diaphragm in there and trying to take that apart. But just, that's not worth it, is it? I'm going to see if I can get that a bit cleaned up and put it together. I also found that when I switched the adjuster switched around the adjusters from this Spitfire unit and the GT6 unit, then the threads worked, because the problem I was having on the GT6 one is that you could try and tighten it up, but it just pulled through. So somewhere between this set of threads and this set of threads and the other ones on the other unit, they work better the other way around.
so it's quite nice. It means I don't have to ditch one. So this goes together. That goes on there. Little washer to stop the spring falling into, pushing into this bit that engages with the contact plate. Spring on, and then we screw into this bit here, and then this little E-clip goes on. Okay, so I counted that as 34 clicks back and forth, so I put it right in the middle. Now I can put it on the distributor. Right, now to get back to the actual point and assemble the 6-cylinder distributor. So I'm going to get this bit done, same as before. Okay, after a bit of fiddling, I have got this located, and a punch is serving as the temporary rivet. That's clearly more than 5 thou. It's probably about 18. Well, I'm going to have a think about this. I think that what I might end up doing is having to take one of these, which are an 1/8 of an inch, and flap them down to a 1/16 plus a couple of thou. And I couldn't really have taken any more or any less off the bearing surface on the shaft. So I've started working on reducing the thickness of this thrust washer. It's fairly slow going, even with it being relatively soft metal, but it is working, and I am managing to keep it of a uniform thickness, fortunately, with some corrections. So I'm going to get that to more or less where it wants to be and then check again. So I've been trying to thin down this thrust washer manually on a piece of glass and with some sandpaper, and it was taking ages. I was almost taking the ends of my fingers off. It was very well. I failed to keep it flat, so I thought there must be a better method. There's loads. I found a lot of info on a Model T forum, because obviously, they're dealing with much older cars with much simpler cars as well. But anyway, what I'm going to do is face off this bit of aluminium, super glue the washer to it, and then I should be able to turn it. Just be able to take off the right amount, which, if that works, is going to be dead easy. This did not like how I was turning it, so I'm going to have to go and do some research. Look at that. I was trying to measure it and it kept looking like I was taking nothing off, and it's distorted, so this side was glued to the metal, so it's pulled away and sunk. So after destroying this thrust washer, I've done a bit more research on what oilite is. Oh, I kind of knew what it was, but I was assuming that it would turn a bit like either brass or copper. It doesn't. Apparently you should have an extremely sharp tool to turn it, which I wasn't using. I'm also, given the way it's made, which is you get powders of whatever the metallic components are, and those are then put into a shape and fused together to what makes it porous and why it can hold oil. And I think that's part of why I've got this distortion, because wasn't really a structure that could be turned in that way. So I've done what is hopefully the much more sensible thing, and I've bought myself some shim stock, and that's going to let me cut shim to go under the unmodified thinner thrust washer, because this versus the actual shaft with the bob weights on, that's the bearing surface. We don't expect this to spin, so a shim under this should be acceptable. Let's see if I can cut myself a 15 thou shim then. So this is the idea I've read about for making washers out of thin shim stock, is to clamp a guide for the hole on and chain drill and then finish off with a file and then just cut around the edge and deburr. So I'm going to give that a go. And that seems to have worked. I can feel my clearance of, that's about 2 thou. The range is 2 to 5. So I'm happy with that and can actually put it together. Okay, so I've got all my bits laid out and let's just get this put together. Here again we need to get the drive dog on the right way round. So I'm with the narrow side of the gear facing that way. Rotor arm should point that way, because this is the correct way around. So if the engine was here, narrow side, the drive gear in the direction of 1, and with rotor arm is facing away from about cylinder 5 would be. Right, narrow side towards the engine, rotor pointing away. Okay, so I ended up having started with a 15 thou shim and a 1/16 thrust washer. I'm now down to a 5 thou shim and I have acceptable tolerance on the bottom end. So clearance between the fibre washer and the body with the drive dog fully on is now about 5 thou, which should be 2 to 5. I suspect my measuring with punch as a temporary replacement for the roll pin was just that tiny bit different. Anyway, it's all together now, it's fine, it spins nicely. I'm just going to put the rest together. I've just done that on the Spitfire distributor, so I'll film it, we'll put it on the stand and check the calibration curve, and that's this all done. Okay, so that of course took longer than expected. I found that the plate that the points sit on had a lot of play in it, so I've stolen another one from one of the spare distributors. Found myself a NOS condenser. There's quite a few of these on eBay at the moment if you're in the UK. That's made in the US. Also got a Unipart distributor cap, and this is quite nice, this one, because it's 29th of the 4th 83 as its pick date. And that's about when this car was last on the road. Okay, that's all set up and ready to test. Our new points arrived, or new old points. They are very heavyweight, made in Blackburn. Okay, so I've just nipped upstairs, plotted my results, and in terms of the distributor's mechanical advance, everything sits right in between the two maximum and minimum specification lines. So I'll show that on screen now. It's a bit wobbly, but this, you can see this is some bits of wood and a timing light, and the right and proper thing to do would be to go and make lots of measurements and take an average, but for the purposes of what I want, I have confirmed that this distributor is going to work okay. So I'm quite happy with not doing anything further. For the vacuum advance unit, which I'm just going to show now, you'll see it's a little bit above spec, which really I can cope with, because
this is hardly a precision instrument either in terms of measuring my vacuum, and it definitely maxes out at the expected point. So for the purposes of does this stuff that's sat in the shed for 30 something years, 40 years nearly, eek. Does it work? Can we make it work? And it does. And a good clean up, place of some bearings, and I'm happy this is going to be ready to go back in the car when that time eventually comes. So that's it for this video and this mini part of the project. I'm still thinking about how and when I go about bringing GT6 home and start work fully, but I definitely don't want to leave it too long. And before I go, I want to say thanks to Greg at the Lost Wrench Garage over in US, fellow at restoring Spitfire, and has triumphs with too few wheels as well. So thanks to him for giving me a bit of a shout out. It's very much appreciated. Go have a look at his channel if you haven't already. And as he said, if you like watching anyone on YouTube, me, him, anyone else, we'd all appreciate a subscription. It doesn't cost you anything, so click that button. And thanks to everyone who does subscribe, everyone who watches, everyone who comments. It's all appreciated, and I'll see you next time.